And I want to move to influence channels, sorry. And the 6 influence channels are authority, rationality, vision, relationship, interest, and politics. And I think all of you took the assessment. So let's do a little quiz. And if you can tell me what was your outcome, what was your top style that you got in the assessment? So please type in the chat. D, F, D, D. Okay. So yes, we have mostly rationality and some relationship, and Elaine, politics, yeah. Brenda says, finance girls, you are in the right place. I'm not sure, Brenda, we'll discuss this a little bit. So when I took this test, my main channel was politics, and I was really surprised about it. But then I wasn't surprised anymore because I'm a very rational, logical person. And now, you know, as an entrepreneur, I also have to deal a lot with like vision, because nobody reports to me, nobody owns me anything. So I have to kind of inspire people to do whatever I want them to do. But when I was responding to this survey, I realized that I was responding based on my experience in other workplaces. And I realized that the other workplaces I worked for, they're very political. So I had to figure out how to operate in a political way. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if you got a certain style that is your only way of doing things. It just means that perhaps in the environment you're working in, that's what you're most accustomed to using. Did anyone have any reflections or questions about the influence channel, about their results? Like, were you surprised to see your result, or you wish to score better at another category?
I noticed that my top 3 were all basically tied. Like politics was my top one, but then vision and relationships were just as close. So it's sort of speaking to the point you said earlier where, you know, depending on the work environment you're in, maybe that's how you have to respond now. But, you know, I do identify with the other 2 so strongly that it's, you know, how can I make those 2 work more to my benefit in my work environment right now?
Yeah, and I just want to clarify that the influence channels are not the same as personality types.
Mm-hmm.
They are kind of skills that we have.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect reflection of like, okay, maybe I'm best at politics, let's say, but I need to improve at building relationships and building a vision.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of, or maybe I need to improve in all of them.
Right.
Like,
or it's even like, how are they all related? And if politics is the strongest, how can I make the other 2 help, you know, build that skill?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So let me jump into each channel. I try to kind of give you a few key points about each channel. Again, it's a complex concept. It's not something like, here's the channel, here's how you're going to influence, and tomorrow you're going to master it. But there are things to think about as you keep evolving. So authority. Authority channel is, you know, you emphasize either your formal position or the formal processes, procedures, rules in the organization. So let's say you're trying to convince somebody to do something and you don't have the power, but you can say, you know, our senior management said that this is the most important thing for the organization. So therefore we have to do it because this is the senior manager's goal. Or, we have a very strong policy against taking risk, like physical risk in the organization. Therefore, we have to invest in all these safety procedures. So I use something kind of formal, structural, and I say, we have to do this. This is the authority one. And it's most commonly used because, managers, they'll, throw down their authority and say, you have to do this because I said so. But we're seeing that this is not very motivating. And, the last statistics I saw was something like in the US, around only 30% of people are happy with their jobs. So nobody wants to go to work where they just have the boss screaming at them and telling them what to do. They want to feel like they're part of something bigger. They want to be in a nicer environment. They want something more. And I will tell you all, like whenever I'm talking to companies, this is one of the things they're always telling me about. One of our biggest challenges is how to keep the newer generations motivated and interested in working for us. So definitely not through enforcing rules and regulations. That's not the answer. And it is important sometimes because you might have, a risk situation. So I gave an example of Mary Barrow, which is the CEO of General Motors. I don't know her personally, so I don't know how much of her time she spends on, acting very authoritative, but she runs an organization that has 200,000 employees. They have plants, they deal with like physical risk, they deal with very big decisions. So, she sometimes probably has to take that role of saying, this is what we're going to do, and this is why we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to do it. Because you can't just kind of brainstorm and make decisions in this kind of huge, high production organization. This style can be stressful to some if it's not natural to you to give directions and kind of take charge. So just something to keep in mind. And if you are put in a role where let's say you have to become a plant manager and you hate giving directions and you hate taking decisions, maybe that's not the right job for you. But, if you're managing people, maybe you can be a little bit more authoritative to signal that you're the boss and you're taking the final decision. So just things to think about. Rationality. So, emphasis on data-oriented reasons. It's the second most used because, we need to produce results, we need to make money. So we have to explain and rationalize all our decisions. And it's often when you're trying to convince somewhere upward, you have to give them a presentation while you tell them all the details of like why they need to take this decision and why do they need to enter this market and what are the risks. So you'll have all your arguments lined up. And sometimes with peers also, like you're kind of exchanging ideas and you have to tell them like why your idea is going to be better than their idea. And you talk about the merit of each idea. And it could be like, so Elaine asked about kind of, I'm using politics a lot, but you could use politics with rationality. So when you gather all the people around a common goal, you can say, well, our common goal is to increase sales and we all need to work together. And by the way, for us to make 25%, we need to make 5% this month and 5% next month. And this is how, the way we're working right now, this is our outcome and we're not getting there. So let's all work together towards a common solution. So very easy to combine with any other style. So even like we're going to talk about vision in a second where, we're going to create the best company in the world. This company is going to have the most amazing products. But maybe you can say, what does most amazing products mean? Oh, they're the ones that, create the most beautiful skin in 57% of women. And they give amazing lashes to 35% of women of such and such category. So it's not hard to combine this channel with others. Now, as I mentioned before, below there, like for finance people, for lawyers, for people who deal with like numbers and facts, this is the most common channel. And I used here a picture of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's the Supreme Court judge, because judges and lawyers, they're very rational. They always have to justify everything they're saying. It has to be super accurate, precise, analytical, backed by many, many sources. So this is kind of the rational mindset. And again, none of these women I'm going to mention here, they're 100% one thing or the other. Nobody is that way. But it's just to help you kind of think about what mental mode you need to get into when you're going into this channel. So a little note about rationality versus rationalization. And this is, again, one of those like little hints of things we didn't know that we should know about that I'm giving you. So it's a little funny quote here. Like, people generally have two reasons for everything they do, a good reason and the real reason. And why am I saying this? Because if you read the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, I really recommend it. And he talks about how people make decisions and think and all that kind of stuff. And what he talks about is basically that people are very good at processing lots of data, organizing patterns, understanding how these patterns relate to their realities and perceptions. Think about, what other patterns exist, but then they make a decision based on intuition. Like, they'll get all this big information, paths, blah, blah, and then they'll make their final decision, which is not directly linked to this unconscious way of processing things. But once they make this decision, their mind asks them to explain the rationale of why they made this decision. So then they'll look for all the data and information and say, oh, I made this decision because of this, that, and the other. So they are not necessarily rational, but they are rationalizing. So this is when you're dealing with people, and this is a very interesting point about the rational channel, that you think basically you need to prove them that the answer is true and this is all the exact perfect numbers, but actually maybe you don't really need to. You just need to kind of get them happy about the story you're telling them, and then feed them a few numbers so that they feel good about the story and feel like, oh yeah, this story has been backed by facts and numbers. So I'm gonna give you an example from my experience. So I give a lot of talks about women's leadership, and I talk about the value of women's leadership to organizations. I tell stories about it, and kind of throughout the lecture, I show videos, whatever. And the idea of the lecture is to make people think about why they don't have more women leaders in their company and what are the challenges women face. And I noticed that I always get at least some of the people to think about it. And I intentionally feed them some stuff that says, research says that more companies with women, companies with more women perform better. Or I'll say, oh, here are all the qualities where women perform better than men. And if I just had those things in my presentation, I'm really sure that nobody would pay any attention to it, and I will think it's really boring and gives them lots of useless data. But once I make my presentation interesting, and I also feed them some data, they feel like really comfortable about taking actions and empowering women in their organizations, because they'll say, well, yeah, but it's backed by research. It's not just my opinion. I can tell others that it's backed by research. So it's another one of those things where you can think about, whenever you're presenting stuff, think about what kind of data people like to see from what kind of sources. And you feed them this data and you take away a lot of their insecurity about this thing has not been backed by proper data. Now, one very, very easy thing to do is, like, whenever you're presenting outcomes of something, the first slide should have some summary which says, like, this analysis has been made based on, I did this with all of you, X number of interviews, these type of data sources, these type of reports, analysis. So you just kind of summarize to them in one slide that you've done your research and you've done your homework. And then you talk about everything you found out. Just having that one slide that tells them you've done your homework takes out a lot of the anxiety of, like, this has not been properly researched. Just a little trick.